This is to provide you with an introduction to explicit instruction. This is the Anita Archer Charles Hughes book. It's a great one if you're interested in learning more about explicit instruction, but you've just read chapter 2 from this book, or will read that for this week. We use this as a text in our undergrad for instructional design and instructional methods. Again, I can't say enough good things, especially since it is short and focused. It's not a textbook that does a lot of things. It's very focused and will give you a great foundational knowledge of explicit instruction. I'm not going to go through all the pieces and parts because I think chapter 2 does a great job of that. If this is something, again, that you're very familiar with, and maybe you used this book in your undergrad or in another way, please feel free to skim chapter 2. But if this is your first introduction, don't be tricked by but what seems like the simplicity of the chapter. Explicit learning has exact structure and detail. It is exactly what it says it is. It's very direct and obvious learning. The most important part, I feel, as an instructor, is that it makes the learning obvious and communicates that to the students. So there is no guesswork for students. It's really important to use with students with disabilities, but it's also important to use for all kinds of new learning or learning things that are difficult for all learners all the way up into adulthood. I think about maybe just a couple of years ago when I was shown how to change a tire. It was very explicit instruction because I'd never done it before. It leaves nothing to chance. We don't just assume that any of our diverse learners, any of our learners know. We make sure that they know. It is a very clear, it has a lot of clarity, and it's in the chapter 2, it seems very structured and static, but it's not. It can be flexible. Even in the examples in our chapter, you can use it prescriptively, but also change it. For example, you could use any of the 3 parts of explicit instruction as a lesson on its own. During the first day, you might do all of this watch the I do, the modeling. During the second day of instruction, you might do the guided and prompted practice where we all do the learning. And during the third day of learning, you might then turn it over and say, now you do the independent practice, you do the activity. At the same time, all 3 steps might occur in one lesson. I think about handwriting practice, or I think about vocabulary for a foreign language. You wouldn't spend 3 days learning one word. You might do that in 15 or 20 minutes. So very flexible, even if it seems prescriptive. If this is your first time digging into explicit instruction, please consider completing at least one of the application exercises listed in your chapter. I think that would be really valuable and really important. If you're already practicing this, maybe skim one of those application exercises. Take a look at them. They're pretty obvious. They state their goal right at the top, but please don't just skip those in our chapter because they make up a lot of the content, but also it is explicitly teaching you about explicit instruction. I want you to also consider the fact that this is not just a way to teach younger children. This can be used through high school and, like I said, into adult learners. It depends upon the complexity of the skill and the knowledge of the student. There are some common misconceptions. I think, especially in the middle school and high school, for all diverse learners, not just our students with disabilities, I think sometimes teachers assign unprompted practice, that independent practice or a homework, on a skill that is different than what was originally taught. So let me give you an example. That would be like a Spanish teacher teaching the word hello and teaching that only that word explicitly, and then assigning all greetings for homework. So you have to make sure, and this is a common mistake that we notice as teacher prep instructors when we're doing it for the first time with our undergrad students, that you have to make sure they practice, that your students are practicing the same skill throughout the lesson, and you're not just assuming they know and can apply further on. Explicit instruction isn't for all areas. You wouldn't always teach this way. You have to make a call on the complexity of the skill and the knowledge of your learner. But this is especially valuable for brand new learning and jumping in when a student is really having difficulty with a skill. Make sure you've appropriately read chapter 2 in this book, and let me know if you have any questions, but keep digging, because we're going to take another look at explicit learning in this lecture and then tie it to UDL.